Hey, what's up, everybody? This is G here, and I'm going to be basically reintroducing myself along with Cyrus here because we are from Soul of a Fighter. And yes, we are here to talk about MMA, fighting, boxing, events, situations, fighters, all of that fun, great stuff, and everything like that. We've been gone for a little second, but now we're back. So I will give it over to Cyrus so he can reintroduce himself as well.
Thank you, Gerald. Good evening, everybody. And it's good to be back. I don't know if you've missed us, but we've sure missed doing this. It's been a while, but never forgotten. Um, like as G said, we just want to reintroduce ourselves and um, like basically catch up a little bit on what's been going on in the world of MMA and fighters. This is I mean, if any of you have been listening regularly, this is a podcast. This is an MMA podcast by fighters, about fighters, and most of all for fighters. So it'll always be from the perspective of fighters' rights, and basically, it's been a hot minute since we last were here, so we thought we'd catch up. We kind of run down what's been going on and kind of give our thoughts on what's been going on because there's been a lot going on. And well, like I said, glad to be back.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the MMA pandemic. I mean, we're not talking about like how the coronavirus is basically affecting the MMA like world and how it's affecting events and cards. We're talking about the consistent problems that happen in the MMA world due to a certain somebody or somebodies and everything like that, making it suck and making it actually worse over these last half decade for a lot of fighters. And Cyrus, who do you think that biggest problem is?
Well, the biggest problem, wow, that's such a great question. But I think the biggest problem isn't so much as somebody, or I think it's the whole it's the whole it's the whole sport in the sense that it's the greatest sport as far as I'm concerned, but it's run wrong. It was never set up right. And when it comes to fighters' rights and who gets what and who benefits, it's completely messed up. It's open to the most corrupt, the most unfair practices. And if anything, the pandemic, I mean, it's been rough on everybody. And I'm not saying this flippantly, but there have been some positives. And as far as MMA goes, it's been positive in the sense that it's exposed just how bad to the wide world, to people who aren't familiar with the sport, to the mainstream, how unfair and how lopsided the sport of MMA is for executives and promoters against fighters. Like fighters have no say. Like I mean, I guess we could get into it a little later. Or we could get into it now.
I mean,
When you have,
we got time. Like I said, it's like with
all right,
fighters not having any say. Like, from the time that they try to have a fighters union, I think there's what try to like they've tried like what 3 times so far, and they've went from like unknown fighters and everything like that to like other
yeah,
fighters who are directly from the UFC. And one time, what even GSP got involved or something like that. Was it?
yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, they've had it a few times. I mean, I remember way back in the day. I think he was one of the. I mean, that was the Randy Couture's. Although Randy Couture, he's not pro union, which I kind of agree with because unions are very close to communism and to crime if you look at it. So he's more of an association guy. He wants it to be. He's always been pushing the boxing, the Muhammad Ali Act. Then you have some who figured out that MMA is a lot like tennis, and I actually agree with that. The way tennis works is very similar to MMA. And some people, they're not that many, but some people who think properly realize that if MMA was run like tennis, it would be great. It would be a win-win for the fighters in the sense that before tennis players had any rights, the Grand Slams, I mean, competitions owned tennis players' rights, which is just like the UFC owns like 500 players' rights, registrations, and they can only fight there. So,
Right.
for example, there were a lot of tennis players who could only play in the Australian Open because they had their rights. Then the Tennis Players Association was born, and that's how you have Grand Slam champions like Nadal can win the French Open, the U.S. Open, the Australian Open, or Wimbledon in the same year because he can compete in all of those. Before it wasn't like that. So basically, if MMA was like that, it would be great. So, for example, John Jones could be Bellator champion, UFC champion, and if you could be bothered, ONE FC or PSL or even Ryzen.
Right.
So basically, the way tennis works is the players have the power. They have the power, but they also have to respect the tour. Like the tour have guidelines and it's a point system. So that's one way. Okay, I'm going down the rabbit hole here, but I'm just giving you an idea.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is it's it's just it's completely and utterly controlled by the promoter, which is just wrong. I mean, like I'm not going to go into detail, but this pandemic has proven once and for all, like for years, the UFC were trying to just tell people that, oh no, we respect fighters. Fighters are free to do what they want, and
Until they go to another
with
organization.
when Dana White went on his one man crusade to put on fights during the pandemic, it kind of exposed to one and all like just how it's not just how it's fighters have no rights. Fighters are pieces of meat, and the beauty of this whole thing is, I mean, I say beauty with irony here. The greatest fighter, or one of the greatest. I mean, John Jones, the destroyer, the multiple time champion. He has no rights. He's the
Right.
best. There is no one. I mean, like for me, it's as far as I'm concerned, my opinion. There's GSP and there's John Jones. There's nobody better than those two.
Fair.
So it's 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it, but whatever. But John Jones, when he asked for more money, there was no negotiation, which is just unbelievable because like you're the greatest fighter. He's the Michael Jordan of our sport, and you're telling me that the Jordan of our sport can't even have has no negotiation power, has nothing. He's going to be dictated to. That's just unbelievable. It's 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 sad. It makes our sport look bad. And then um, Dana
Sounds like a
Dana
plan.
fucking White, as they call him. He's he sounds worse and worse because he sounds like a spoiled brat because he's always had his way. When you always give someone their way, they're not even going to try. They're not even going to make a good argument because it's like whatever they say goes. So he says the dumbest shit, stuff that he doesn't even think about what he says, and it works because I mean it's been working for years because nobody challenges him
Right.
because
And he's gotten
people
away
just
with it.
lay like he said the dumbest thing you could ever say. We're talking about John Jones here, a guy who's been around for over 10 years, who's been just I can't even I'm struggling to find the words to describe what he's done. And forget about what how you feel about this person outside the cage. We're talking about sporting excellence, athletic excellence. We're talking about this right now. We're not talking about his personal life or whether you think he's a good guy or not. He's the best in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And when he asked for more money because he was willing to move up to heavyweight and fight possibly the scariest heavyweight that's ever existed, Francis Ngannou, and he asked for more money. He was just told no. They wouldn't even negotiate. They wouldn't even hear what they wouldn't even hear his financial request. They just said no. And when he got upset, they started pulling out every kind of bitchy argument, like, something an ex-girlfriend with bad faith would do. And Dana actually did everybody a favor because he showed his ass. He exposed himself to one and all. Anybody who has the brain to think things through knows that something's seriously wrong. He uttered a phrase that will stay with me for a very long time. He said he was asking for Deontay Wilder money. So fucking what? This is just the dumbest, most cockamamie, most I can't even put the word to describe how stupid and pathetic it is for him to say that. Deontay Wilder has been a top draw, has been an attraction in boxing for 5 years. He's an excellent attraction. He's an excellent boxer. He's not the most polished because he's a basketball player that happens to hit harder than anyone, possibly harder than anyone that's ever lived. But he's not a polished boxer. And yet, after 5 years, he's making $25-30 million.
Yeah.
And you're telling me John Jones is asking Deontay Wilder money? My question to you is, why isn't he even making Deontay Wilder money? Deontay Wilder should be asking for John Jones money. John Jones has been at the top, at the peak of the sport for over 10 years now. And you, the president of the biggest fight promotion in MMA, are saying that he's asking for Deontay Wilder money. It's like, for example, somebody complaining that Michael Jordan was asking for Scottie Pippen money. That's what he basically said. And you know what's the worst thing? Is, first of all, that was a lie. Because John Jones answered and said, I'd be happy with a quarter of what Deontay Wilder's making.
Right.
So that gives you an idea how bad, how disgusting, how I can't even, I don't know what to say. Like, seriously, think about it. Deontay Wilder has been an attraction, has been a champion for 5 years now, maybe a little bit more. He's been an attraction for the past 3 years. And yet, like, it's not even close to what John Jones has done. What he's accomplished on the athletic side, on athletic excellence, like, but then also box office. It's Deontay Wilder isn't even close. John Jones has been at it for 10 years.
Right.
And you're telling me, like, your argument is he's asking for Deontay Wilder money. He should be getting twice what Deontay Wilder gets.
But he's not, because Dana White knows exactly how to control his fighters. He knows how to turn them against each other. He knows how to say, hey, John Jones, even though you're like one of the most amazing MMA fighters on the planet and everything, do you see this guy, Francis Ngannou? He's over here drawing people in. He's over here creating highlight knockouts and everything. And we could basically undervalue you, because we know that if we undervalue you and you leave, all we have to do is just play Francis Ngannou highlights for like 3 months straight. And then the only thing we have to do after that is basically just make him a champion. And a lot of the fans who are in the MMA market right now and everything, they want to see highlights of Francis Ngannou nearly decapitating people day in and day out and everything like that. And they're going to make money off of this. The UFC.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, we're not going to go into detail because we don't have like that much time, but we'll get into to it more because that's what we do. But it's every possible way you can imagine to be exploited. That's what's going on in MMA. That means, like, they own your image rights for life in perpetuity. That means like you can be washed up and they can still use your image rights, your likeness. They can still show highlights of you way after you're gone, even after you're
UFC,
dead.
EA Sports, like what, like 2030,
Exactly.
they can
And
still use your character.
it's been going on for years, and it's ridiculous. And part of it is the fighters' fault because the fighters need to wake up and smell the coffee and realize that this is ridiculous. And it's just like it's. I mean, this this is prostitution.
Pretty
As
much.
far as fighters' rights, fighter pay, fighters having a say, like about their safety, about like how they get tested, about how they're treated, about how like their opinion on what they're going to do. They're being dictated to by men in suits or men in black t-shirts, bald-headed men in black t-shirts who've never fought, who've never felt what it was like to get into a cage and get your head kicked in by fist or by shin or being submitted or having your arm ripped off. These are people who've never felt that, who've never. I mean, just like I've done it. I'm not, I'm no champion, but I've gotten into the cage. I've made the walk,
Right.
and I can tell you, like I wish that some part of me. I mean, I'm not one of these that's like, oh, if you've never fought or if you've never been punched in the head, you don't have an opinion. You don't have. I'm not one of those. But I wish that they had a rule that like any fight promotion had to have like at least three people who've had that experience of just walking into a cage for real for a fight because it's intense and you're walking in there in your underwear and then it's
The
it's kill or be
preparation,
killed.
the training, everything that's like going on and everything like
Exactly.
that.
The
And
the
this,
the weight cut, the everything, but it's just that. Just I mean, okay, we can talk about it all, but just that walk when you're waiting for to fight, you're in the dressing room. They call your name. They say you're up. You walk down. You walk up the ramp, or you walk through that that whatever it is. Like some people have ramp. Some promotions do. You do the walk in. You get undressed. You get ready. You put your mouthpiece in. They put the Vaseline, and then you get into the cage and you wait for your opponent, or you walk in. If you're second, if you're on the red corner, you walk in after your opponent. But just that's intense. It's a great feeling, personally, but it is intense because it could, like anything could happen. You're throwing bones at somebody else's head, at somebody else's body. So you could you risk serious injury. You risk death. And I find it just so ridiculous that people who've never done it, who've never experienced that, can dictate and talk about and dictate to fighters what they can and cannot do, how much they're going to get paid,
right.
and when they're going to fight. Like the whole thing during the pandemic, like Dana White tried to put on some cards, some Yankee cards, and I'm not. I wanted to see some MMA. I mean, the confinement was shit for everybody. I really wanted to see some MMA, but at the same time, I care about fighters' rights. I care about fighters like getting paid. I care about fighters' health. But I really wanted to. There was a part of me that wanted to see some live MMA.
Right.
But
Live MMA is great, but
the way it happened was ridiculous. Like, it was the way he spoke about fighters just made me sick to my stomach. And I'm not saying it's all his fault either, but
no, that's
it's
exactly what I was about to ask.
yeah,
I was gonna
it's
say it's just
it's
like in all of this and everything like that, with everything going on, like how much blame do you assign to the managers, in your
oh,
opinion?
the managers are some of the worst. I mean, I don't even think. I'm glad you asked this, Gerald. I think the managers are worse, are 10 times worse than Dana White. Dana White, I think, I mean, he's full of shit. He's a liar. He's he's I mean he's the epitome. He's the epitome of bad faith, of deceitfulness, of a lot of things. But I think a part of it is as well. he's one of those guys. He's like a spoiled brat. Like like when you don't discipline a child and he grows up, and I mean even worse, like he's rich
Yeah.
and he grows up without ever suffering consequences. That's what that's the kind of human being you're going to get when he always gets his way, when he never suffers consequences. He always gets his way, whether he's right or wrong. That's what you get, and I think that's what Dana White's problem is. There's a lot of things he does that aren't right. But at the same time, like a promoter's supposed to lie,
Yeah.
and a promoter's not supposed to look out for fighters' rights. Every once in a while, you get someone exceptional, someone really good, like Scott
Scott
Coker,
Coker. Yep.
who will try and help, but that's not their job. So I'm not blaming Dana White for not looking after fighters' rights. I do blame him for trampling.
And
I do blame him for
exploitation.
lying. I do blame him for messing with people's careers. But like the way he talked about fighters, it's like it doesn't even enter his mind. Like, oh, maybe fighters don't want to fight. Maybe fighters, like they're human beings. Like I honestly believe he thinks of fighters as outside of Ronda Rousey and a couple of his favorites. I think he thinks of fighters as commodities. It's like a computer game.
Yeah.
And that's not cool, but it's been going on for so many years. The worst part of MMA, the very worst part of MMA, are the so-called managers. 99.9% of managers are scumbags. I mean, for me, the worst one, in my opinion, my humble
I
opinion,
already know who
the
you're gonna
worst,
say.
fucking Ali Abdelaziz, piece of shit, piece of shit. I mean, a piece of shit is actually very, very kind. He's a bottom feeding scumbag. He's a lowlife. Like this guy, he's getting rich off of. I can't. I don't know what it is. Like he has some athletes on his books who are Olympians, who've won Olympic gold,
Yeah.
who are the top, la creme de la creme, and they follow him, and he consistently outs himself as a scumbag. As he'll take the UFC side constantly, and yet no fighter. I mean, we're talking about fighters like Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is one of is the greatest judoka America has ever produced.
Right.
She's won multiple gold medals. She's amazing. She's an amazing person. Whether you like her as an MMA fighter or not, that's your business. But she is an amazing, amazing athlete, and
So.
she signed with him.
Right.
And
I mean.
he's got Frankie Edgar on his books. He's got Chris Weidman. He's got
I
and
mean.
he constantly throws them down. Sells them down the river.
Right.
He constantly throws them under the bus.
And
So I'm not even going to get into like the personal stuff, like the
yeah,
fact that
no.
he's
I
an
mean.
informant. That I'm just talking about like what he does as a so-called manager. He's
Manager.
a scumbag.
I mean, because the thing is that I've noticed with him and everything like that is, for his UFC fighters and everything like that, he has fighters that he's willing to toss out there for high risk, high reward fights. And then there's other fighters and everything like that where he treats their careers like gold.
Absolutely. And that and he's getting rich off of them. He's
Right. I
getting
mean,
his, I don't know, his 15, 30, 50%. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys, he's taking 50% off
I
of some of
wouldn't.
these guys. That's
I
how
wouldn't.
much of a scumbag
I
he is.
mean, and the funny thing is, and everything, it's like some of these type of managers, whether they're a big name or no name, seem to be working with like Dana White because a lot of these managers and everything, when Dana White comes out and says things about certain fighters, these managers of these certain fighters who have things said about them rarely ever come out and say anything. And I'm thinking it's because those managers still have fighters who are in the UFC roster, and rather than sticking up for their fighters, who are basically being disparaged by the UFC or Dana White at the time, are more worried about the fighters that they do have in the UFC that they can still make money off of. Because like Corey Anderson, he had an Instagram post, and he said he had some higher up friends in the UFC and everything like
Yeah.
that in the background. that were like basically upper level.
Executives,
Right.
background, yeah,
And he
backroom
said,
staff.
right, and he said, you all didn't say anything to back me up. You didn't say anything to cover me. You didn't say anything to stick up for me in my defense. When Dana White came out and said that I could be more competitive in the UFC, because we all expected Dana White to basically go out there and lie. We expected Dana White to go out there and say
Yeah,
everything
to
was
shit on them.
right, just completely crap on him and throw him under the bus, because that's what Dana White does when fighters who are really good or can make tons of money leave and go somewhere else. But some of these managers and everything really did not come out and say anything for Corey Anderson, and he made a note of that in his Instagram post. If you guys ever want to go see it and reference what we're talking about, go check out Corey Anderson's Instagram, and a picture right about the time when Dana White said that he could go be more competitive in Bellator. I mean, like Dana White, he knows he could basically talk all the serious crap about these fighters. He knows he could go out there and go lie about these fighters every single day and twice on Sunday, because he knows that whenever they're able to basically pump up their numbers or get more exposure or basically make themselves a draw, he knows he could say, "Oh, hey, you said you wanted about $2 million, 1 million, $1.5 million a fight. Yeah, we could give you that, because that's a drop in the bucket to them and what they should actually be getting." Like Jorge Masvidal, like when Jorge Masvidal and Dana White were basically like in public, just basically arguing. Jorge Masvidal's like requesting his release. He's saying, "I'm not gonna fight. Like I'm not doing anything." And Dana White's like, "Oh, we'll just get somebody else to fight." Then Gilbert Burns drops out of the Cameron Usman fight. Correct?
Exactly, because
So
of he tested positive for COVID-19.
right. All of a sudden, Jorge Masvidal all of a sudden matters, and he's all of a sudden able to get a brand new contract, even though he wasn't even finished with the current one.
No, exactly. But I mean, like, let's be honest. Fighter contracts are bullshit.
Exactly.
They're
But
they're
but there's the
that
thing.
I mean, like, they're an insult to contracts. Like,
There's the thing.
it's
Dana White and even some managers have gone on and said, "Oh, hey, well, a contract is a contract. You signed it." People, MMA fans, have been like, "Oh, if you don't like what you got, you shouldn't have signed the contract."
yeah.
But
But then, like, that's really cute when you, like, so many fighters, and this is in court. These are court documents where people would, like, whether it was Dana White himself
oh
or
yeah,
Joe Silva coming up to a fighter, like top fighters, handing them a contract and saying sign it or get the fuck out.
right.
It's like basically there is no negotiating.
There is none,
There
and
is
that's what I'm.
absolutely no negotiating. And if your manager happens to be called Ali Abdelaziz, there is no negotiating because you've been fucked. You've been
Right.
fucked by the UFC and you've been fucked by your own manager, the guy who's supposed to negotiate on your behalf. So, like, that's why when fighters complain about their contracts or they talk about contract issues, like recently, Dana was on ESPN and he was being interviewed by this journalist who used to be an NFL um, players' rights activist, and he got skewered because it's like, this is bullshit. What you're telling me is bullshit. You're telling me this, that, and the other, but like they have no rights.
Right.
Like it's ridiculous. And like I said, like this pandemic thing, this confinement thing was good. It was a positive because it exposed once and for all to the mainstream that are clever enough to listen to, who actually just like will look into it, see that there is fighters have no rights. It's basically they are dictated to.
Pretty much.
Whether you talk about the Reebok deal, whether you talk about USADA or UBADA, as some people would call them
Whichever.
in a joking manner, because
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Like fighters have no say on anything. They have no say on what they wear. They have no say on the gear they wear because the UFC gloves have been bad for years and nobody's done anything about it because fighters have no say.
Exactly. And that's what I'm just saying. It's like they have no say. They have terrible managers. They have a fight promoter that can basically say whatever, basically affects their whole entire careers and everything like that with just saying something, not even anything he's done in the back room. And then it's people still believe that fighters and everything like that should just suck it up and just deal with it. Because like I was
Yeah.
stating with the Jorge Masvidal thing is a contract is nothing in the UFC. That was proven with Jorge Masvidal. He proved that like 100%. He's just like, my contract sucks. I want a new contract. Next thing you know, when the opportunity basically arose, and Dana White and company basically were like, oh crap, well, this is inconvenient for us. And then all of a sudden they changed his contract just like that, out of the blue.
Because the contract isn't worth shit.
It's not.
It isn't worth the paper it's written on. It's a token. It's the contract is basically a weight around the fighter, basically keeping him from fighting anywhere else. That's all it is. It's not about him making money. It's not about him having any rights. It's a weight around your ankle or whatever
It is. I
to
mean,
keep you from fighting anywhere else, to keep you from making money anywhere else.
it's just
And they can get rid of you whenever they want.
exactly.
So that's what a contract is.
It's
And
a
that's not a contract.
it's a
There's no job
perceptual.
security.
It's a perceptual like chain.
Exactly.
That
That's all it is.
to
It's
nothing.
slavery.
Right? it's like yeah, you have this contract saying that you have to do this, but then on the same end and everything like that, the UFC on the other hand and everything like that doesn't have to uphold anything in the contract to the fighters. Probably because the fighters don't request anything from them other than money. Like if the UFC is able to basically take a fighter to court because they want to go fight for another promotion or sue that promotion for letting the fighter fight for their promotion and everything, what can the UFC fighters sue the UFC for? Because so far, how many fighters have tried to sue UFC and none of them have won? There is
You have there's only the that little group of the Kung Lees, the John,
Mark Hunt.
what's his name? Pardon me?
When Mark Hunt sued as well.
Yeah, but that was doomed from the start. But there's the class action lawsuit
Right.
that's actually, whether it works or not, is a positive because they did it the right way and it exposed a lot of things.
Yes.
It exposed
And that's what I'm
just
saying.
how badly, yeah.
You know, it's just kind of like everybody knows the UFC will sue you. Everybody knows the
Don't
UFC will
fit.
easily toss like $10 million to get lawyers to sue fighters and everything who don't have $10 million lawyers. But then the thing is, in that same aspect, the UFC is basically skewered and everything, that whole entire like section of, you know, litigation in their favor so much and everything. Fighters are just like, oh, I better not do anything to violate this contract because I don't want to get sued by the UFC. But there's nothing in these contracts and everything where the UFC can break something and the fighter can say, you are basically in breach of this contract 100% and I can sue you or I could nullify this whole entire contract. And that's because the
Exactly.
UFC hands out the contracts well written 100% in their favor. And managers and fighters need to start taking looks at these contracts and everything, especially fighters who do have the power, who do have the draw, who do have the exposure. And they were like, you need to rework these contracts. You need to rework the wording and everything like that. We need to come to some type of or form of 50-50 compromise in here and everything like that. And I'm going to guarantee you the UFC is going to fight them on it. They're going to say, we're not going to give you a contract. But when you have people like John Jones, Francis Ngannou, Henry Cejudo, Peter Yan, Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, who else? Cody Garbrandt. Let's take, what's his name? Derek Lewis. And they all say these contracts need to be redone in a form where if you say that you can sue us for violating the contract, we can sue you for violating the contract.
Exactly, and that's the way it should be. A contract's supposed to work both ways. I mean, you know, there's bad contracts, there's bad jobs, but I mean, as bad as jobs are, even Amazon. Okay, no, Amazon is on a whole other level, but even Amazon workers can leave whenever they want and find a job somewhere else. UFC fighters can't because they just if they don't release you or cut you, they can keep your rights for years. to the point where, they can wait till you're too old to fight, or, and the thing is, like, fighters, most fighters live paycheck to paycheck, because even, like, the top fighters are underpaid. So can you imagine what, like, the average or the unknown fighters make? It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. And the fact that the UFC is an American company makes it even worse, because it's anti-American. It's um, it's just wrong. It's abusive in every possible way. It's it's I don't even know how to describe it anymore, because it's just wrong. It's it's what, like, Teddy Roosevelt fought against. It's um it's disgraceful. And the fact that, we live in we're in 2020, and this garbage is still going on is a disgrace, and something needs to be done.
Correct. So,
Like I said, there's some good people out there who are fighting to change this, to improve on things. It's just the other problem is fighters themselves, because there's always a big part of the problem is there's always a fighter that's willing to step up. And there's nothing wrong with stepping up and, showing up, but you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to see the forest for the trees here. And, like, okay, this is something that really hit me hard, because I'm a huge Tony El Kukui Ferguson fan. I have a lot of respect, and as far as I'm concerned, like, being a fan of his, opened my eyes to a lot of things, because it also shows just how unfair and disgraceful the way the UFC run their business, because it's about favorites. It's about what they like, who they like. Like, Tony Ferguson owned his title, a title shot, like, honestly, 5, 6, 7 times over, easily. He's been beating the best of the best. He's been, they've put him in with the worst kind of opponents, the most dangerous kind of opponents, and he's always come up trumps. And then during this pandemic, during the confinement, they tried to push through the Tony Ferguson, the Khabib Nurmagomedov Tony Ferguson fight. Khabib Nurmagomedov happens to be the champion. He happens to have the whole country of Russia behind him, so he has more rights. Tony Ferguson wasn't so fortunate. But the thing that really got to me was Tony Ferguson didn't even look at the big picture. He was just thinking, I can fight. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to prove to everybody. Like, you're Tony Ferguson. You have nothing to prove to anybody. Right. Nobody has anything to prove to anybody. You have things to prove to yourself. But he went through a weight cut. He went through a weight cut. A weight cut is rough on the body. It's
twice?
It's a big deal. He went through a weight cut for a fight that was never going to happen. Khabib didn't even try and cut weight, because he knew it wasn't going to happen. It got canceled. And then 2 weeks later, he went through a whole other weight cut for another guy called Justin Gaethje. Already doing that for any fighter, I don't care who you are, it's just not advisable. If he'd had a good manager, a manager would have told him not to do that.
Right.
But he just was so intent on proving himself and proving to the world that, like, I'm here, I could fight anytime, anywhere, any place, that he took on Justin Gaethje, who's a monster, I have so much respect for that guy. It was like the worst possible matchup, and he went through 2 weight cuts in the span of 2 weeks. And he didn't have time to train. Like, Justin Gaethje and Khabib are 2 different people. They fight completely differently. And he had no training camp, and he had 2 weight cuts before he fought him.
Right.
And it's just bad. I don't even know what to say. It's just that little. Just this example, the Tony Ferguson example, shows you what kind of state MMA is in, because he went in there in the worst possible way, in the worst possible situation, and still went there and fought him and got the shit kicked out of him because he wasn't prepared. It's impossible to prepare for Justin Gaethje in less than 2 weeks.
Exactly.
I mean, it's already hard enough to train for someone like Justin Gaethje in 3 months, which is your average fight camp. But it's just, that's my point, is that fighters don't realize. The other problem, I mean, like managers, bad managers like Ali Abdelaziz are the worst part of MMA.
I
But
agree.
a close second or third is the fact that fighters have this built into their brains that, like if you don't accept the fight, you're a coward, and that's ridiculous because
Or you just don't want to fight, or the fact that they could just get somebody else.
exactly, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's
Because
it's
a lot of fighters don't know their worth,
um
and every single one of them and everything like that. Even a fighter with like a 0-4 record, or a 2-3 record, or like a 5-0 record and everything, all of them have a worth. Whether they're in the UFC, whether they're in Bellator, whether they're in ONE FC, whether they're in Ryzen, all of them have a worth and everything, and it's way higher than the UFC is telling them that it is. And they're
exactly.
and they're using that basically as a glass ceiling to keep all of them down.
It's it's disgrace. It's
Agreed. I totally agree. Like, so other than the managers and other than fighters not knowing their worth and understanding contracts and knowing their worth, what else do you think that you could or would change about the whole entire situation or the system in general?
but it's I don't know whether it needs to change from the top up. It might need to change from the bottom up. Yeah, start from the bottom. Like um Scott Coker's doing a good job with Bellator. Like he's treating fighters right. He's I wouldn't say looking out because that's not his job, but he's he treats them with dignity. But
He's
it
being a
shouldn't depend
person.
on whether you have Scott Coker or Dana White. Like Scott Coker is a decent human being,
Uh
and
huh.
he's always been a good promoter in the sense that he takes care of his fighters, and fighters are happy to fight for him. But it shouldn't depend on whether you're with Dana White or Scott Coker or some other guy. It should depend on, pardon me, it should depend on whether said promoter, whether he cares about your rights or not, has to care about them because there are laws, there are directives, there are guidelines in place, and these guidelines are enforced by law where he can't treat you a certain way. That's why uh, um, Randy Couture is such a hero because he's been talking about that from the beginning. It's like it doesn't matter whether they treat me right or not. What matters is if they treat me right, because they have to.
Or that they should. Just based as being a human being and wanting people to do good, considering what they're all putting online.
Yeah, because they're treating you right because they have to because otherwise they'll get into trouble because there's laws that they're going to have consequences and and yeah, it's just that simple. It's you have to have something that protects fighters. There has to be some recourse. Right now, fighters have no recourse. They have nowhere to go. There's no one who will help them. There's no one who will enforce any kind of policy or law. They have nowhere to go, and that's just it's shocking because every other sport, no matter how small, no matter how ridiculous, I mean, even bull riders have rights. Like MMA fighters, um, it's it's a beautiful sport. They do I'm not sitting on the sport of MMA. God knows I love it. It's just for such a wonderful sport where you can see such wonderful people, amazing fights, amazing moments. Like the fact that fighters' rights is in this state is a disgrace.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, maybe one day fighters will probably get it together and find something to do and everything that will basically turn the system right where it's supposed to be. But I mean, that's all I have to say about this situation until we talk about this again next time, which is probably going to be sooner than later.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I guess that's all we got to say for this time and everything out there, MMA fans. I mean, do you have anything else to say, Cyrus?
No, that was it. It's well, look, we got intense about this whole thing, but it was necessary, and it was a short episode, but basically that's where we're at right now. We're going to talk about the fights. We're going to talk about upcoming events. We're going to talk about like the great cards we've had recently. The Daniel Cormier Miocic fight, which was brilliant, but at the same time it was frustrating because again, fighters have no rights, hence people make mistakes and there's no consequences. But talk about the eye folks here. But yeah, it's we're out of time soon, so we're gonna say good night, and we'll get back to the normal run of things next time.
All right. Well, that's the end of the show. Fans, thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to hit the subscribe. Don't forget to follow us and everything like that when we will bring you the next episode talking about more events, more fighters, and more topics and situations affecting both. This is G here, and I am out. Cyrus?
See you guys later.
All
Glad to
right.
be back.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Till next time.